Welcome to day 56. We are nearing the end of the chapter. Tomorrow will be the end of Leviticus and we'll start into Numbers. That's a totally different beast. Leviticus 25 and 26, let's get at it. Some really cool, important things, and I would have to say, shy of Israel getting their land back in 1 year, what I'm going to say today is not quite as important, but it ranks up there, so you picked a great day to tune in. So let's get at it, and then near the end I'll tell you what I mean by that. People belong to God. Let's revisit this concept. Why is that important? Leviticus 25, verse 55. For the people of Israel belong to me. This is God speaking. They are my servants whom I brought out of the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. Extremely important to understand. God's making a statement. He said this many, many times. These are my people. I am their God. And eventually he says, you will call me your God. Right now they're kind of still screwing up and they're getting all these instructions and they're going to make mistakes, which is the next part of this, and I keep talking about this on purpose. Chapter 26, verse 3, if you follow my decrees and are careful to obey my commands. If you follow my decrees. God, again, is foreshadowing this. Why does he need to say that? He already showed them all these miracles, brought them out of the land of Egypt, and he's given them this perfect land that's full of milk and honey. What do you mean, if we follow your decrees? Of course we're going to follow your decrees. No, they don't. He understands this and knows this is going to happen. Okay, if you do all these things, you're going to get all this great stuff. Enemies will flee from you. Chapter 26, verse 8. 5 of you will chase 100, and 100 of you will chase 10,000. All your enemies will fall beneath you, beneath your sword. Gideon chased, he had just a few soldiers and chased a whole army away. So that story we'll get to as well. But what a wonderful thing, and it's true. It came true a couple different times. Not just Gideon, but another time in the Bible will show that they defeated an army that is far greater than what they were. Okay? Now, God says he's going to live among us. Chapter 26, verse 11. So I will live among you, and I will not despise you. I will walk among you. I will be your God, and you will be my people. Okay, so he's saying, follow my decrees. I'm going to be there with you. I will walk with you. What a great thought that is, that God would be walking with us, and someday that is going to happen. But he knew they were going to turn their backs on him and worship other gods. So if this is your first time reading through the Bible, spoiler alert, yeah, they turn their backs on gods and start worshiping other idols. And now we get to the biggest part of this, the disobedience of, let me see if I can shut that. Oh, excuse me. Disobedience, the biggest chapter, the most important part in the Bible that has anything to do with Israel getting their land back in 1 year. The most important part right here in Leviticus 26. Earmark this chapter, write it down, do something that you have this to access, because we are going to come back to this and really say something about May 15th, 1948. I'm not a person who puts a whole bunch of credibility to anything. When anybody says, oh, this is going to happen in this many days, and the Mayan calendar is this and that, I don't put any credibility in that. God is perfect, though. And when he says he's going to do something, then what we should be doing when we read this is looking for when that happens. So, in Isaiah 66, it talks about Israel getting their land back in 1 day. Okay? Talked about in Genesis about being exiled for 400 years, and they did that. Talked about being brought back into the land. They're about to be brought into their land. It talks about them being exiled if they disobey. And it talks about in this section how often that's going to happen. Why would he say that? Okay, if it's not going to happen, why would he bother saying it? I'm going to point out these things right here. So here they are. Verse 18, if in spite of all of this, so in the first paragraph here in verse 14 through 17, he's giving these commands, and he says, if you don't listen to me and if you don't obey all these commands. And verse 18 says, and if, in spite of all this, you still disobey, I will punish you 7 times over for your sins. Verse 24, then I myself will be hostile towards you. If you fail to learn the lesson, this is verse 23, if you fail to learn the lesson and continue the hostility towards me, I will personally strike you with calamity 7 times over for your sins. So in your list of 7s, this is a big deal. Not only is 7 used for holy things, but he's going to use this for punishment. Verse 27, if in spite of all this you still refuse to listen and still remain hostile toward me, then I will give you full vent of my hostility. I myself will punish you 7 times over for your sins. And so from verse 14 up through 39, it's about God saying, listen, you screw up, I'm punishing you 7 times over 7 times what? And that is the key to what we're going to discuss as we get into the prophets and what they're prophesying. 7 times what? 7 times whatever their punishment was will be 7 times that. And that is so very important. I'm alluding to this. Some people may understand what I'm talking about. If you're first time reading or you've not caught on to this, relax. We will get to it. But you need to earmark this. This is extremely important. So I've put enough emphasis on that. Don't forget this part. Please keep that close by. Earmark it. Put a bookmark in it. And then the very last thing is the hopeful part, which is so great about God. Verse 40. But at last, and this is so important, but at last my people will confess their sins. Okay, so he's saying, if you disobey me, and then at the end here he says, but at last you're going to confess your sins. Because he already knows what they're going to do. God is not bound by time. He lives in the past, the present, and the future at all times. So he knows what they're going to do. He's alluding to it. And then he says, but I'm also in the future. I know what's going to happen. My people will confess their sins and the sins of their ancestors for betraying me and being hostile toward me. When I've turned their hostility back on them and brought them to the land of their enemies, then at last their stubborn hearts will be humbled and they will pay for their sins. Then I will remember my covenant with Jacob and my covenant with Isaac and my covenant with Abraham, and I will remember the land. So God is going to bring them back into the land. When? May 15th, 1948, in one day. So you keep that earmarked. We're going to come back to that. That is day 56. I'll see you tomorrow.